the divide between allies. But, Kiritsugu, shouldn't we think of a way to handle Draco first? Irisveal asked, her voice carrying an undertone of concern as she glanced at Saber, who stood quietly but radiated barely suppressed tension. If Draco eliminates the other servants before we act, Saber will be at a severe disadvantage, Irisveal continued. Even with her noble phantasm, victory might slip from our grasp. Kiritsugu nodded, acknowledging her point. That's why we won't ignore the other servants' fights with Draco. We'll observe closely and strike at the right moment. There's no need to confront Draco directly. We'll let attrition wear him down. Irisveal frowned, puzzled by his detached tone. Saber, however, stiffened. Her emerald eyes narrowed, and anger seeped into her voice. Not fight Draco, she echoed, disbelief laced with fury. Kiritsugu remained unfazed, his voice calm and clinical. The other masters have undoubtedly come to the same conclusion. None of them will confront Draco head-on unless forced. He's too dangerous. Instead, we'll use this terrain to our advantage. Draco can't approach our territory without exposing himself. Pausing, Kiritsugu leaned back in his chair, his voice measured and deliberate. Once Draco attacks another servant, at least one or two masters will seize the opportunity to fight him. That's when we'll strike. Draco's pride makes him blind to the possibility of becoming the hunted. Saber's grip tightened around the hilt of her sword. Her anger, simmering since Kiritsugu began speaking, erupted. Master, your plan is nothing short of despicable. Her words hung heavy in the room. Irisveal winced at the raw indignation in Saber's tone. This wasn't the restrained anger Saber had shown toward Ryder's mockery or Castor's insanity. It was deeper, more personal. Amiya Kiritsugu, Saber continued, her voice firm, you insult the honor of heroic spirits. The Holy Grail War is meant to prevent senseless bloodshed by limiting the conflict to a chosen few. It is our duty to fight, not to manipulate from the shadows. Let me fulfill my role as a servant. Why do you insist on such cowardly tactics? Do you not trust me? Kiritsugu met her gaze with an unyielding silence, his expression unreadable. The indifference etched into his face only stoked Saber's fury. She bit her lip, visibly trembling with frustration. Irisveal's heart ached as she watched the exchange. She loathed Kiritsugu's mask of apathy, the cold detachment that reduced everything to calculation. This wasn't the man she had come to know, the husband who had shown her warmth and shared moments of tenderness. Memories of a stranger. Irisveal glanced at Hizomiya, the silent woman standing by Kiritsugu's side. Mia's stoic demeanor betrayed no emotion, her loyalty to Kiritsugu absolute. She neither spoke nor reacted to Saber's outburst, her presence an unwavering shadow. Irisveal had seen Mia before, back when Kiritsugu first joined the Einzbern family. Mia had been the bridge between Kiritsugu and the outside world during his seclusion. To Irisveal, Mia represented a part of Kiritsugu's life she could never touch, a time when he had been someone else entirely. The faint smell of tobacco lingered in the air, a scent Irisveal hadn't associated with her husband in years. It transported her back to the early days, when she had detested the smell and the cold, ruthless man it clung to. Now, that man had returned. The warmth of the past 9 years seemed to have vanished, leaving behind the merciless weapon Act had adopted to win the Grail. Irisveal's chest tightened as she realized the man before her no longer felt like her husband. A tactical mind? What about the Overseer's new rule? Irisveal asked, steering the conversation away from Saber's anger. Didn't he suggest a ceasefire with all but Draco? Ignore it, Kiritsugu replied, his tone dismissive. The proposal outlined rewards for compliance, but said nothing of punishments for breaking it. If the Overseer tries to interfere, we can feign ignorance. Kiritsugu's voice grew colder. Besides, the Overseer can't be trusted. He's clearly siding with Tosaka. Covering for the Assassin Master makes that obvious. Until we uncover their full intentions, we proceed with caution. Saber's entire frame trembled with suppressed rage. She bit her lip so hard it nearly drew blood, her eyes fixed on the floor. Irisveal's heart ached at the sight, but she knew Saber wouldn't welcome empty comfort. The proud king of knights demanded action, not words. The meeting adjourned. "The meeting is over," Kiritsugu announced, rising from his seat. "Irisville and I will remain in the castle to prepare for a potential attack from Draco. Mia, return to the city and gather intelligence. Report back immediately if anything changes." "Understood," Mia replied without hesitation. She rose and exited the room, her movements efficient and precise. Kiritsugu gathered the maps and documents spread across the table, then left without so much as a glance at Saber. The silence he left behind was deafening. Saber stood rigid, her knuckles white as she clenched her fists. Her frustration and disappointment filled the room like a storm about to break. Irisville hesitated, unsure how to bridge the chasm between them. After a moment, she placed a hand on Saber's shoulder, offering silent gratitude for the knight's unyielding resolve. Then, without a word, Irisville turned and followed Kiritsugu out of the room, leaving Saber alone with her thoughts. The king of knights stared at the floor, her pride wounded and her faith in her master shaken. She vowed silently to resolve the growing discord in her own way, her sense of justice burning brighter than ever. The weight of a broken man. Kiritsugu's willful disregard for Saber wasn't born solely from differing ideals. Beneath his cold demeanor lay something deeper: anger, hatred, and perhaps even guilt. These emotions festered, fueling his indifference. His treatment of Saber had crossed a line. No matter how divergent their strategies, they were still allies bound by a common goal. To dismiss Saber, so completely bordered on humiliation. Irisville found Kiritsugu standing on the balcony, leaning against the railing, gazing into the dense forest that surrounded the castle. The night wrapped around him like a shroud. She felt a pang of relief that Mia was not by his side. "Kiritsugu," she called softly as she approached. Her voice, though quiet, carried a firmness she hadn't intended. He didn't seem startled, his presence as immovable as the darkness around him. Slowly, he turned to face her, and Irisville braced herself for the icy gaze she had seen earlier. She prepared to confront his cruelty head-on. But when she met his eyes, her resolve faltered. The man before her was not the cold and calculating Magus slayer she knew. His expression was that of a wounded child, tears threatening to spill as he fought to maintain control. His shoulders, once strong and steady, trembled slightly. "Kiritsugu," she began, but the words died in her throat as he stepped forward and embraced her tightly. The strength of his grip startled her. His chest heaved, trembling against her own, and for the first time, Irisville saw him as a man overwhelmed, cornered by his own ideals and the impossible choices they demanded. He began, his voice barely above a whisper, "if I decided to abandon everything and run away now, would you come with me? IRI?" The question hit her like a bolt of lightning. Kiritsugu's desperation was palpable, and the weight of his words left her speechless. She could only stare at him, her mind racing. "Ilya," she finally managed to say, her voice trembling. "What about Ilya? She's still in the castle." Kiritsugu's grip tightened, as if to anchor himself. "We would take her with us," he said, "and if anyone tried to stop us, I would kill them all." The words were raw, unfiltered, and heavy with despair. Irisville realized with a sinking heart that he wasn't joking. "After that," Kiritsugu continued, his voice cracking, "I would give everything I have to protect you and Ilya. I would spend the rest of my life ensuring you're both safe." Irisville's breath caught. The man before her, so haunted and vulnerable, was unrecognizable from the ruthless killer she knew. These past 9 years had changed him. He was no longer the merciless executor who sacrificed everything in pursuit of an ideal. He was a man burdened by love and the fear of loss. But it was that love, the love he had for her and their daughter, that made him weak. That love was the source of his torment. "Can we escape, Kiritsugu?" Irisville asked softly, her voice a mixture of hope and sorrow. "We can," he said immediately, but even as the words left his lips, they rang hollow. His eyes betrayed the truth. It was a fantasy, an illusion he clung to in his darkest moments. "You're lying," Irisville said, her tone gentle yet firm. Kiritsuga's shoulders sagged, as if the weight of the truth had finally crushed him. You can't abandon the Grail, she continued. You can't abandon your dream of saving the world. Even if you ran, you wouldn't forgive yourself. You would judge yourself more harshly than anyone else could. At her words, Kiritsuga's composure shattered. Tears streamed down his face as he sobbed openly, his anguish laid bare. I'm so afraid, he choked out. I'm afraid of losing everything. This was not the invincible Magus Slayer, the hunter of magi, feared by all. This was a man terrified of failure, of losing those he held dear. Irisville stroked his back gently, trying to soothe his trembling form. You don't have to face this alone, she said softly. I will protect you. Saber will protect you. And Mia will stand by your side. Her voice wavered slightly as she mentioned Mia, but she pushed the thought aside. Kiritsuga needed all the support he could get, even if it came from someone Irisville found difficult to trust. She prayed silently, her heart heavy with the knowledge that she could only offer him fleeting comfort. All she could do was hold him, hoping to ease his pain, even if just for a moment. A glimpse of truth. Kiritsugu, Irisville began hesitantly. There's something I need to tell you. He pulled away slightly, his red-rimmed eyes meeting hers. While Saber fought Mordred last night, I had a conversation with Draco. Kiritsuga stiffened at the name, his expression hardening, but he remained silent, urging her to continue. Draco claimed the Holy Grail is corrupted, Irisville said, her words slow and deliberate. He said that its power has been twisted and that its wish cannot be trusted. He offered to save me, to save us from its curse. Kiritsuga's eyes widened in shock. For a moment, disbelief and uncertainty flickered across his face. He said that? Kiritsuga asked, his voice barely audible. Irisville nodded. I don't know if I can trust him, but I can't dismiss what he said. There's a part of me that feels he might be right. Kiritsugu turned away, his mind racing. If the Grail truly was corrupted, then everything he had sacrificed, every life he had taken, had been for nothing. Yet, if Draco's words held even a shred of truth, then there was a chance, a slim, fragile chance, that he could save Irisville from her fate. I need to think about this, Kiritsuga said finally, his voice distant. As he walked away, Irisville watched him with a heavy heart. She didn't know if her words had helped or only deepened his anguish. All she knew was that the war, already fraught with peril, had taken an even darker turn. Unbeknownst to either of them, this revelation would prove to be a pivotal moment in the Holy Grail War, a moment that would shape its outcome and their fates.
Hey everyone, Quantum Audiobook here. Sorry for interrupting, but if you're enjoying this content, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your thoughts on this novel in the comments, and don't forget to like the video.
The streets of Fuyuki were tranquil on a night as dark as today. There were hardly any people on the streets beyond the poor homeless beggars. Even they seemed strangely silent and cautious. This was probably due to the killer's news who had been kidnapping children and slaughtering entire families. None of them wanted to meet this terrible and mysterious man or woman. Luckily for them, none of them were going to meet Castor, who had already been killed by Draco the night before. The common people didn't know it, but the dragon had already managed to restore relative normalcy, eliminating the person in charge of causing nightmares in the city's families. Draco knew that by killing Castor early, he had saved many lives. And, although this should not have mattered to him at all, he was relatively pleased by that fact. The statement Father Risei had made did not take Draco by surprise. Since he was a nuisance to Tokiomi, and therefore was also a nuisance to the church, sooner or later he would resort to this tactic to get him out of the way. Draco was not bothered by this measure they had taken. In fact, it was of far less importance than he had originally given it. After all, Father Risei had to be alive to deliver the reward. The streets of Fuyuki were strangely dark, or so it seemed to Draco. Dressed in a black sweatshirt and black pants, he easily passed unnoticed in the black night. Walking slowly, Draco made his way through Fuyuki town from Mayama town, the location of Draco's residence, and arrived at the Shinto area. The city's new area was developing favorably in Draco's eyes, and Draco couldn't help but sigh as he remembered that this whole place was going to be destroyed in just a few days. It was a shame, but that was an inevitability to his plans. Draco stopped thinking about it. It was silly to give the matter too much thought. After all, those who were going to be harmed were not related to him. It was a shame, but Draco had to sacrifice those lives and buildings to achieve his goal. He needed more strength. If the forces that were threatening him were capable of destroying the entire universe, then they should be stronger than Ophis or Great Red. In fact, they should be much stronger, with enough power to annihilate all the most powerful people in all the universes. They were the ultimate villain. Being so, to defend himself against them, Draco needed a power equal to or greater than those of these mysterious enemies. He didn't want to bear the burden of saving the universe. That role sucked. Everything that all these heroes of justice have to put up with to do good is pure crap. The quiet days he had lived in the past few years had led him to fondly embrace this quiet life he was coming into so far. But he could not maintain that life, for he knew that trouble would come to him even if Draco did not seek it out. If trouble was going to come sooner or later, he had better be prepared for it when it did. The road sloped upward, and Draco found himself climbing a not-too-big hill. The target was at the bottom of that hill, a Christian church. Father Risset had offered to give command seals to the masters who joined in killing Draco and the girls. Knowing the masters, they would only try to proactively attack Draco if, and only if, Father Risset gave them the command seals. They were magus, and they would not risk doing anything that would not pay off for them. The problems with this situation that set it apart from the original one with Castor were several. For starters, Draco wasn't doing anything as horrific as what Castor would have done if Draco hadn't killed him. Instead, he was killing servants, or more specifically, he was hunting them. Lord El Malloy, one of those most eager to get the original story's command seals, was now dead. That is, one of the masters most likely to try to make Draco's life miserable was already dead. With Waver, something similar was happening, but the conversation Draco had had with Ryder and his master earlier that day had greatly reduced the chances of Ryder or Waver joining some other master. Kiritsugu was going to just wait, just like Tokiomi. Their strategies were strangely similar, as well as different. Tosaka was not going to allow any other master to obtain command seals, so he would wait to finish off Draco with Archer and then finish off any other servants that had ended up wounded. Kiritsugu didn't care about command seals, a little bit of importance he gave them, so he wasn't going to force any situation that could be minimally detrimental to him and his target. The only unknown was Kiriamatu. He really wanted to go find Draco and attack him since he could rescue Sakura that way. Maybe he's looking for where Draco is hiding to attack him in his own base. But Draco was not afraid of Berserker, much less with a master like Kiriya. The only way he could do any damage to Draco is to hit him in the head. The only problem would be to finish Berserker off before Kiriya died himself. Reaching the top of the hill, Draco set his eyes on the church in front of him. Assassin was amazing. Draco had noticed that he had been spotted long before reaching the top of the hill, and yet he had been unable to find the exact location of Kiriai's servant. At least he could sense the presence of Kiriai and Risset inside the church. With determined steps, and without paying attention to the increasing number of presences watching him, he couldn't know their exact location, but Draco knew they were there. Draco entered the interior of the church. It was time to hunt down the third servant. Draco opened the church's doors, finding a setting he had seen many times throughout Fate/Zero and Fate/Unlimited Blade Works. During the Fourth Holy Grail War, the church was the base of operations for one of the masters, Kiriai Kodomine. He pretended that his servant assassin had been killed by Tosaka while using the many clones he possessed to spy on all the masters. At first, he only wanted to know the movements of the different masters. Still later, after the conversation that Gilgamesh has with Kiriai, in which he awakens the sadistic side of the priest, Assassin begins to investigate the private lives of all the participants of the war. If Draco remembered correctly, this conversation took place after the first day of the Fourth Holy Grail War. So it had already happened. An assassin should have many of his 80 bodies watching everyone involved, including Draco. If Tosaka Tokiomi had agreed to Father Risei giving the order to attack Draco, it was because Kirai knew where the dragon was residing. Draco was practically convinced of this. However, he was also certain that the young priest had not told his master all the details. Assassin was a threat, and he had to finish him off quickly. Draco had previously considered the servant to be the weaker one, so no important attention should be paid to him. However, he had already discovered his mistake. Draco was very wrong. Assassin was easily the most dangerous servant in this war. No servant could defeat Draco in fair combat. That was the reality. His true form, along with Levitian, was too powerful for either of them to truly defeat him. The problem was that Draco couldn't sense Assassin's presence, even when he knew that many of them were watching him at the moment. Not to mention Mordred or Zoe. Could Kuroka sense their presence with Senjutsu? Probably not, as she had not informed him at any time of this servant's presence. That being the case, the servant could make a surprise attack at any moment of carelessness. Even if Draco was confident that his 3 servants could fend off the enemy, he was worried about one person who was completely incapable of this. Sakura. Draco was afraid that something bad could happen to Sakura. Kirai was a sadist, and he wasn't going to kill the girl. At least not right away. He would use her against Draco, finish him off, or use him in any of his plans. Draco could abandon Sakura if he didn't want to be manipulated, but was he capable of it? That's why he had headed in the middle of the night to Fuyuki Church when this thought woke him up in cold sweats. He hadn't even explained to Kuroko what was going on as he quickly dressed and went towards the place where Kirai was hiding. "To what do I owe this late-night visit, young man?" said an elderly priest. The man looked to be around 80 years old, despite his bulging musculature. It was indeed hard to believe that a man could retain his physical body so adequately, but Draco knew of a person in DxD of a similar age whose body was much more powerful. Risei Kodomine was the person who had officially given the order to attack Draco. The incentive he used to get the masters to obey him was the command seals he maintained as war supervisor. So, if he was dead, the rest of the masters should not actively seek trouble with him. At least in theory. Draco smiled as he walked over to Risei. "I beg your forgiveness, Father, for I have come to God's home to commit a grave sin." With his calm voice, and filled with what seemed to be regret for defiling a sacred place, Draco let Father Risei learn that he had not exactly come to pray. Draco could see the fear in Risei's eyes. Perhaps the priest hadn't expected him to go straight to the church, although it actually made quite a bit of sense. In the original story, Risei was never in any danger from the order he gave to attack Castor. The eccentric servant and his master were never aware of this order. Even if they knew, they probably would never have done anything against Risei. Risei took a step back. Draco didn't need to use Senjutsu to know that he was terrified. With his age, it was possible he would die of a heart attack before Draco got to him. I implore you to think about it. God is always watching us and will punish us for our sins. However, you can always try to fix this by doing good deeds. If God wants to condemn me for all my sins, performing one more or one less will not change my fate. The blood on my hands is far greater than you can ever imagine, the same color as the hell my soul will burn in when I die. As much as Draco had killed evil and corrupt individuals inside for the most part, it didn't change that he had committed countless murders. Of course, this was important if he was a religious person. Unfortunately for Risei, Draco did not believe that God would punish him. For several reasons, but the main one was that God was dead in DxD. If Draco was going to die somewhere, DxD was his only option. The second main one was that God probably didn't have the strength to punish him without getting seriously hurt or dying once again. Draco stood in front of Father Risei and placed a hand on Father Risei's chest. "Please." Risei could not finish his prayer, as blood began to gush out of his mouth. He lowered his head with an agonized groan and stared in terror at the hand-sized hole through the place where his heart should be. Barely a second later, his limp body fell to the ground. Father Risei was dead. Draco felt no sorrow. He had never felt any for those who had opposed him. Having become a monster years before, He had still hoped that at least his heart was still that of a human. However, that useless thought had only brought him trouble and had almost cost him his life. Draco had learned that a monster's heart was not so different than a human's. Probably that's the reason for his confusion at the beginning. But Draco had lost many of the emotions he thought he wanted him to have in his previous life. At times, he wished he could remember it. At times, he didn't care about that human life. Pity was one of them. Draco directed his gaze around the church. From left to right, he looked at every corner, every place with a shadow. He couldn't see them, but he knew they were there. Assassin had not tried to protect Risei, though Draco had already expected this. Kirai didn't feel any kind of love for his father. His twisted personality didn't allow him to feel affection for anyone. Probably, he is regretting not being able to kill his father personally. Draco summoned Agni Gandiva and pointed through an exact spot on the walls of the church. "Why don't you stop hiding? Let's play a little." The floor of the church glowed with the red of Risei's blood. But Draco ignored the blood gushing from the corpse. He was already used to it. He was aiming his bow at a specific point on the wall, ready to fire at any moment. Using Senjutsu, Draco could sense Kirai's presence. The priest ran away from Draco, perhaps hoping that the dragon would not notice his pitiful attempt to flee. Useless. Draco didn't care if Kirai fled. The important thing was for his servant to come out of the shadows. He pulled back the bowstring, and a dark light covered the place. An arrow with dark and red patterns appeared perfectly placed. The arrow didn't seem to be anything special, but at the same time, it radiated a mysterious power. Draco only had to release the arrow to kill Kirai Kodomine. This was really tempting. Killing an evil person who was only going to cause trouble in the future was something Draco was really interested in. Thanks to his archer and arrow creation skills, both at maximum level, it was impossible for him to miss a shot as long as his target was within the range of his presence detection skill. However, killing Kirai was not his primary objective tonight. Draco pretended to fire the arrow, but stopped at the last moment. His senses alerted him to deadly danger, at the same time as numerous presences entered his presence detection range. "Finally, I was wondering if you were really going to let me kill your master." As he spoke, Draco put away his bow and moved from the spot he was in with a nimble somersault. After landing a few feet behind his initial position, he was able to observe his attackers. A muscular older man, a young woman, a teenager, a middle-aged man, each and everyone present looked different. Yet Draco knew they were all part of the same person. The only thing they had in common was their dark clothes and their skin, their violet hair, and the masks with which the Hassans were recognized. Only 4 had attacked, which did not surprise Draco. Nor did it surprise him how extremely weak they were, being that their strength was divided in their bodies. One of them was the woman who always talked to Kirai in the anime. Another was a colossal assassin, probably one of the most physically powerful. The one with the exaggeratedly large fists was striking. Their features didn't matter. They were too weak to harm Draco. They knew it. They knew that it didn't matter how many assassins attacked Draco. That's why only 4 had gone out to prevent him from shooting Kirai. Their goal was to buy time, a perfect strategy with no crashes. Everyone believed that Assassin was dead. Finding 4 of them would result in a shock to the master who found himself in this situation. That master would finish off the servant's 4 remnants and go home happy, satisfied to have finished off a rival. Meanwhile, Kirai could have fled and continued to prepare with Tokiomi for his next step in the war. It was a perfect strategy against anyone but Draco. Draco moved fast, summoning Levitian as he ran towards the assassin. They moved fast, but Draco managed to decapitate the big one before it could escape in time. The other Hassans attacked Draco, but he backed off and ran out of the church. The Hassans did not relax, and instead began a chase towards Draco. As Draco ran, more Hassans appeared, but they were too weak. He killed them easily in very few moves. Draco did not receive experience. He probably had to kill them all before he received all the experience. As long as he received it, he didn't mind receiving it fragmented or the full amount. He did not need to level up to defeat this enemy. The Hassans had to follow Draco. They had to stop him from advancing. Draco was running in Kiriai's direction, and they had to stop him at all costs. Kirai had spent a command seal for this, and another to call all the Hassans who were investigating the rest of the masters. With a diagonal slash, Draco killed another of the bodies. He had noticed one thing, and that was that the assassins were becoming more powerful as Draco killed them, probably due to them regaining the strength that had been intended for the fallen Hassans. How many had he killed already? 50? 60? The fight had taken them deep into a forest, where Draco had sensed that Kirai had stopped. Had he given up already? Probably. The presences were no longer hidden. Draco could count 32 of them. It was safe to say that these were the last Hassans left alive. Kirai had decided to go all out with one last suicide attack. If attacking 4 at a time, or 6 at a time, didn't work, maybe a pitched battle of 32 against 1 could have a positive outcome. But it's useless. All 32 attacked at the same time, 100% coordinated. They all came from the same person and his multiple personalities, so they understood each other better than anyone else. They must have been furious, right? 67 of them had died at the hands of Draco, another at the hands of Gilgamesh. Their wish, at the end of it all, was none other than to unite the 100 personalities back into one. That wish could no longer be fulfilled. "I pity you," Draco muttered. There was no point in dragging this out much longer. They had already decided to go for everything or nothing. That being the case, Draco could give them a quick death. They were getting closer. 10 meters. Draco began to charge his mana through his sword, causing its dark blade to take on a glowing color. The place lit up. Draco could see the cold eyes behind the mask of his attackers. 5 meters. Draco finished charging the mana into his sword. He didn't even have to lift a single Levitian seal. It was unnecessary. 2 meters. Draco spun and let the sword discharge its power. A circle of fire appeared. Draco felt his sword pierce through the body of his enemies. A simple twist. 32 died. Assassin disappeared. There was no trace of blood. None of Assassin's multiple personalities had left any sign of his existence after his death. Being a servant, his body is spiritual and not physical. Once his manifestation came to an end, everything that once belonged to him disappeared. As if he had never existed, Draco ignored it, though he felt calmer now. It was curious how the servant Draco had despised the most was the one who had caused him the most concern. He had never felt fear, not even being on the brink of death when facing Layden. Well, maybe he had felt it at first when he didn't understand anything and was a little baby dragon. However, the thought that a loved one could get hurt because of him had terrified him. Draco finally saw blood. At his feet lay the limp body of Kirai Kotomine. After finishing Assassin, Draco had pursued his master. It was vital to end his life, as he was a potential problem. It was the same with Kenneth Archibald, Lord Elmeloy. Draco had decided to send Zoe to hunt him down because he could become a future nuisance, but Kirai was boosted several times. You have successfully changed a person's fate. 1 fate point obtained. You have successfully changed a person's fate. 1 fate point obtained. You have successfully changed a person's fate. 1 fate point obtained. You have successfully changed a person's fate. 1 fate point obtained. You have successfully changed a person's fate. 1 fate point obtained. You have successfully changed a person's fate. 1 fate point obtained. You have successfully changed a person's fate. 1 fate point obtained. He is a true psychopath, even if he hasn't figured it out yet. From one point of view, Draco had managed to save his soul before Gilgamesh finished corrupting him. Sadistic by nature, Kirai was going to kill his master after being influenced by Archer. Later, he would blame the innocent Korea for killing him in front of Sakura and Rin's mother, causing him to go mad and cause brain death to Mrs. Tosaka. 7 fate points. Unbelievable, Draco muttered as he watched Fuyuki's Dark Night. With a wave of his hand, Kirai's body was incinerated. Just as had happened with Assassin, all trace of Kirai Kotomine's existence had disappeared. The first fate point should belong to Kirai Kotomine himself. He was still the main villain of Fate/Zero in the final stretch, and because of Draco's actions, he had barely had any real chance to do anything. Furthermore, he was one of the major villains in all 3 Fate/Stay Night routes. From the Tosaka family came 3 of the remaining 6 fate points, or so Draco believed. Tokiomi was no longer going to die at the hands of his student, nor was Aoi going to suffer brain death at the hands of Kiriya because of Kiriai's influence. Rin's childhood would be very different, as her parents were not supposed to die, or at least her mother, Oid Osaka, was still part of the Holy Grail War. From here, Draco was no longer so sure who the fate points belonged to. Perhaps Kiriya Matu was another one of the fate points, though Draco doubted it. He was going to keep dying in this war, and there was no solution to this. His fate had not changed at all. Another candidate was the master that Kiriai killed or wounded. Draco had never been clear on this. To obtain Lancer, Siyu Chulin. Lancer himself was one of the possible fate points. There was also the possibility that the remaining ones were none of the ones Draco had thought of, and a person Draco was unaware of had been the cause of one of the fate points. Whatever it was, there was no point in overthinking about it. At this point, he had already interfered enough with the story. Everything that was going to happen from this point on was going to be a completely different story. Draco had written it in blood. No, actually, there was still one event that Draco had not changed. After all, he hadn't stopped Ryder from going to visit Einzbern Castle. Although this time, Saber and Irisveel's residence in Kiritsugu and Mia's might not have been completely destroyed by the battle between Kaneth and Kiritsugu. Too bad the buildings don't deliver fate points. There has been some action in the night. It wasn't a question, but a statement. A smile crept onto Draco's face. I thought you were sleeping. Draco closed the door to the living room and leaned his back against the bedroom wall. Of course not, Silinya. You jumped out of bed and ran out of the house. How could I not wake up? How could I not worry ya? In front of him, sitting on the sofa, Kuroka looked at him with the playful smile that characterized her. Draco was not fooled. His wife's eyes were serious. She wasn't lying. She really was worried. Draco dodged her gaze and looked to the side. I was afraid. I don't want anyone to destroy our peaceful life. From where he stood, Draco could see Sakura's sweet face. She was sleeping in the bed shared by Kuroko and Draco, which had plenty of room for the little girl to accompany them. At least the little girl hadn't woken up. The dragon had been very careful not to wake either of them, but Kuroka had superior senses. Draco sighed and turned his gaze back to Kuroka. She was not wearing her kimono, but rather simple, comfortable pajamas. Chiron, Valina, and the other girls would have been shocked to see Kuroka in something that wasn't either a kimono or directly naked, how she used to sleep. Still, the pajamas couldn't hide her curves, let alone her beautiful looks. Come, Kuroka waved her hand, tapping a hand on her lap. He knew what she wanted and didn't refuse at all. Draco sat down next to her and rested his head on her legs. Kuroka brought her hands to Draco's head, and he felt her playing with his hair. It had grown back. Maybe it was time to cut it a bit. I thought you liked to fight, Kuroka muttered. But you don't seem very happy. Draco closed his eyes. Why wasn't he happy? Kuroka was right. He hadn't enjoyed the night at all. I don't enjoy murdering. It's necessary, but I don't enjoy it. Assassin didn't stand a chance. Castor didn't either, Draco explained. It wasn't even a fight. I simply assassinated them. Their deaths were necessary for me to level up, but I didn't enjoy the fight. Fuck it, there wasn't one from the start. With Lancer, it was different. It was a fair duel. I fought with everything I had. Lancer did the same. I felt the adrenaline, the excitement. I enjoy fighting. I love to fight. I don't enjoy one-sided kills. They don't bring me satisfaction. I love getting stronger, though, even if it means I do things like I did tonight or last night. Draco opened his eyes and looked up at the ceiling. Kuroka's face interrupted him, and something that wasn't the face but looked like a pair of huge mountains. Isn't it strange? Even my tastes contradict each other. No, Kuroka shook his head. It's not strange. You don't like to murder, but you want to become stronger. I know you, my beloved. You want more strength so that you can defend us, so that our peace will not be disturbed. Even if you don't like to murder, you do it for our sake. Your target tonight, did you say his name was Assassin? Was a possible threat to us, wasn't he? That's why you rushed to eliminate him. You did what you thought was right, and I trust your judgment. I never have, and never will doubt your decisions. Kuroka, I love Yunya. Night had descended again on Fuyuki City. It had only been a day since he had attacked the Kodo mine pair. With them, an assassin out of the picture, it seemed Draco could relax. There were only 4 servants left. Practically half the job was done. However, that was not the case. At first, the Holy Grail War was supposed to last about 2 weeks, maybe less. But he had accelerated this process too much. Perhaps in 2 or 3 days, it would all have come to an end. The best thing was to end this war as soon as possible. There was no sense in dragging out this farce any longer than necessary. It was a waste of time. Sakura had been unable to go to school for a week. This morning, she had already asked about this situation. Somehow, Kuroka had taken it upon herself to calm her worries. Draco had never been good at coming up with good excuses. Zoe was in charge of Sakura tonight, protecting her from possible danger. Now that Assassin was no threat, Draco could be safe, leaving only one of his servants with the little girl. He had only intended to bring Kuroka tonight, but Mordred had insisted on coming with them after learning of their destiny. Draco didn't mind, and neither did Kuroka, so they had agreed to let her accompany them. Einzbern Castle was a very important place in Fate/0. Castor would attack it, using small children to force Saber to rescue them. Kaneth would also attack Kiritsugu, but it would go very badly for him. The Magus Killer would destroy the noble Magus's magic circuits, leading him to despair and many other events that would happen in the future. On the other hand, Kirai would attack Irisveal and Mia, but that was no longer possible. All this had been thwarted beforehand by Draco. It was curious how all the attackers had been killed by him. Many would not believe it, but this was indeed a coincidence. So this is father's residence, Mordred murmured as she surveyed the massive mansion the Einzberns had built on the outskirts of Fuyuki. Truly worthy of the King of Knights. Draco nodded his head. The place was truly impressive from the outside, and it was surely impressive from the inside as well. He could probably only find one problem with it. The only thing impressive about the place is its appearance. I'd rather have a smaller house like the one we have in Kuo, but with a lot more movement. Living here every day would be a bore. Draco agreed with Kuroka. As impressive as this place looked, it couldn't compare in the atmosphere to his home. Though that house had nothing to envy to the Einzberns' mansion. As Draco doubted, they had heated pools and thermal baths. For the pools and baths alone, Draco considered his home superior to the Einzberns. The baths, especially, had given him very good times with Kuroka and Lavinia. Lavinia, he hadn't seen her for a year, just like Natsum. Draco missed all the girls and boys of DxD. They weren't going to notice his disappearance, but he did notice their absence. Draco opened the door to the Einzbern mansion. There was no need to announce his arrival. He had already noticed that they had placed a ward warning of intruders. They had intentionally let them in, or Draco would have had to use force to enter. It's not like a simple magic field could have stopped him. Upon entering, the first thing that struck him was the considerable number of traps set. This was Kiritsuga's handiwork, no doubt about it. A little further on, a silver-haired woman was waiting for them. "What is the reason for your visit?" Irisveal asked with a smile. She seemed calm, but Draco could sense her nervousness thanks to her senjutsu. Kuroka had sensed it too, or so Draco could decipher from her mischievous smile. "We didn't come here to fight," Draco assured. Irisveal let out a sigh of relief. For some reason, she actually trusted his words. Or perhaps she wanted to trust his words. Her time was running out. 3 servants had died, and if she could move, it was thanks to Avalon. "So, we wanted to attend the banquet." Irisveal looked at Draco with obvious confusion. There was no need to explain anything, just wait. Meanwhile, the girls watched the interior of the mansion. Suddenly, a thunderous roar rang in the ears of those present. An explosion of prana swept through the place. Nothing too powerful for Draco and his servants, but enough to stagger a weakened Irisveal. As loud as ever, Draco muttered. The roar came from a nearby thunderclap, and the prana impact that followed it meant that the camp in the forest was already under attack. "What is it?" "A frontal onslaught," Irisveal asked. A pair of strong arms held Irisveal's shoulders. They were the arms of Saber, who immediately appeared at her side when this strange change occurred. "Are you all right, Irisveal?" "Yes, just scared. I didn't think I would visit such a rude guest. I'll go greet him. You stay by me." Irisveal nodded upon hearing this. Staying by Saber's side, who was going out to greet the attack, meant that she herself must also face the enemy. However, the battlefield is the safest place for Irisveal because the strongest servant is beside her. Saber looked at the guests, whom they had not invited, but at least they were not causing trouble. Her gaze was complicated as she passed by Mordred and was confused when she saw the unknown Kuroka. Finally, she looked cautiously at Draco. She knew who was the most dangerous in the place. "Mind if we join you?" Draco asked politely. "Honestly, I doubt this is going to escalate into a fight." Saber frowned, but ended up nodding. Saber agreed to let Draco accompany them, but he had only proposed this to buy Ryder's time to arrive on the scene. After all, the Einzbern camp was strong, but insufficient against Gordius Wheel. The thunder then, and this meaningless tactic, the opponent must be Ryder. Irisveal recalled the overwhelming power of the noble phantasm she had witnessed a few days ago in the warehouse district. The chariot entwined with thunder and pulled by divine bulls. If this type of noble phantasm anti-army were to unleash its full power, it could easily destroy the magic focus points located in the forest. "Hey, King of Knights! I especially came to see you come out." "Ah!" This sound came from the entrance of the castle. It seemed that Ryder had already arrived. Without a doubt, this was the King of Conquerors, Iskandar. Judging by his powerful, reverberating call, his tone was like that of a warrior about to fight. Ryder finally entered. He did so as if the mansion was his own property, his chest puffed out and his steps proud. Waver followed behind him, embarrassed by his servant's attitude and a little frightened at the thought that they were in enemy territory. "Hey, Saber. I wanted to take a look around after I heard about the castle here." "Oh, I see I'm not the only one who wanted to take a look at the castle. By the way, it's hard to get in and out of a house if you have a lot of trees in the garden. I almost got lost before I got to the gate, so I cut some down for you. Thanks to me, the view is much better." Someone tugged on the sleeve of Draco's sweatshirt. It was Kuroka. From his amused look, she seemed to want to know the identity of this muscle-packed clown. "He is King of Conquerors, Alexander the Great." Draco whispered it in his wife's ear, though he doubted it would be enough for them not to hear. Well, Ryder didn't seem to be paying too much attention to Draco right now. "Ryder, you?" Saber wanted to say something, but faced with this enemy who always left the opponent speechless, she didn't know what she should say anymore. It was Ryder who frowned in surprise and said, "Hey, King of Knights, aren't you going to wear something modern tonight? Don't always wear that old-fashioned armor." If Saber's armor could be old-fashioned, how would Ryder's attire of jeans and t-shirt look? This armor was considered Saber's pride, but the cracks in the thick breastplate suggested his weakness. Perhaps the only thing we could say here is the ignorant is irrevocable. Although it was true that the servant of House Einzbern was the only one wearing her battle armor, even Draco's group was dressed in casual clothes. Obviously, no one had come intending to have a fight. Well, at least two people did show enmity to Irisveal and Saber. Mordred seemed to still hate his father, though it was more superficial than the look Waver was giving Irisveal. He probably thought it was her fault that Ryder was now obsessed with casual clothes. Once, King Alexander took the initiative to wear Asian clothing, given his interest in his conquered land's cultures, and caused his followers to avoid him like the plague. Irisveal had heard this story, but she would never have known that Ryder's reason to change to modern attire was because of Saber and her costume. What left them more confused was the thing in Ryder's hand. It wasn't a weapon or anything used in battle. It was a chest. No matter how they looked at it, it still looked like a red wooden wine chest. Ryder, who easily carried the chest under his arm, looked like a wine store owner coming to deliver an order. "You?" Saber, once again at a loss for words, took a deep breath and said serenely, "Ryder, what are you doing here? Can't you guess from the appearance? I came to drink with you. Hey, stop standing there and show me the way. Is there a courtyard here suitable for a feast? You guys can join in too if you like. You're invited." Iskandar gestured to Draco's group as he spoke. Saber and Irisveal were once again speechless. This idiot was inviting other people to have a banquet at the Einzbern mansion. Did he really think he owned the place or something? Wait, Draco hadn't said anything about attending a banquet? Did he know this was going to happen? Saber gave the mysterious boy a deep look, as if she could draw out his secrets with a glance. Obviously, she wasn't going to find out anything, at least for the time being. Ryder, you really are a genius. A feast would be perfect, Draco commented with a smile. I know. I wouldn't be called the king of conquerors if I wasn't a genius. Draco nodded his head, as if it was natural what the man was saying, while Kuroka had a strange smile on her face at the sight of the giant idiot packed with muscles. Currently, Kuroka had her ears and tails hidden so as not to draw too much attention to herself, though Draco had told her that there was no need to hide them. In the end, she was just a companion and didn't want to steal the spotlight from her man. She would rather stay home than actively participate in all the fights, but she had agreed to accompany Draco because they would only have a small banquet with possible future mates. Curiosity kills the cat, or so they say. By the way, this is a challenge. Saber, who should have lost her will to fight, suddenly became solemn. Challenge? Irisveal asked. Yes, I am a king, you are also a king, and I can even feel the aura of a king accompanying Draco. If we are to seek victory at the drinking table, then this is a battle without bloodshed. A genuine smile bloomed on Draco's face as he listened to Saber, just as the king of conquerors nodded with a smile. Ho ho ho, it's good that you understand. Since we can't oppose each other with swords, then let's fight with wine. King of the Knights, Draco, I will not go easy on you tonight. Prepare yourselves. Interesting. I accept, Draco replied cheerfully. I will not lose. Saber, answering resolutely, emanated sharp battle vigor as if facing a battlefield. Only then did Irisveal realize that this was not a joke, but a real battle. Wait, did you say dragon? Waver wasn't the only one surprised on the spot. Thanks to the stealth skill, Draco had concealed his genuine aura at all times. It was only thanks to Gilgamesh's noble phantasm that allowed the King of Heroes to discover the dragon's true origin. Saber finally understood what the strange sensation she had felt in her first encounter with Draco was. She carried dragon blood in her veins, and it seemed that it had resonated with Draco. Since he had hidden all traces of his race, she had not been able to deduce what it was that she found familiar about him. Despite all this, that he was a dragon was still surprising to her. Artoria did not doubt Gilgamesh's words. It was improbable that a heroic spirit as proud as Archer would lie, especially considering the proud smile on his face. Oh, a dragon. Impressive. Ryder only looked mildly amazed, but he wasn't making a big deal out of it. He was paying more attention to the wine Gilgamesh had brought out. Perhaps this one was more important to him. Yes, I am a dragon. Draco had no reason to hide it. I'm a Nephilim dragon monarch. Irisveal was amazed. Not only was Draco a dragon, but he was a king among dragons. Even in the past, before the reverse side of the world existed, stories of dragons were few. But even scarcer were the dragons who had earned a title among them. Although Irisveal was unaware of Draco's title, she put it down to her ignorance of general culture. That's impossible. Waver stood up with a start and pointed towards Draco. Dragons shouldn't be able to get out of that side. The reverse side of the world, the layer of the world that retains the laws of the Age of Gods that houses surviving phantasmal species and presumably divine spirits instead of people. It was common sense that no human could go to that place, and that no phantasmal species could go to the other side. So, what was a dragon doing on the human side of the world? Draco raised an arm in Waver's direction without saying anything. Everyone looked at him in silence, not knowing what Draco was going to do. He could attack and kill Waver in one blow, but it didn't look like Iskandar was going to make a move to defend his fragile master. Draco pulled back the sleeve covering his arm to shoulder height. It was amazing how Draco, who despite being tall did not seem to be overly muscular like Ryder was, had muscles of considerable size and perfectly defined under his clothes. And that was just his arm muscles, if the others could see what was under all his clothes. No, this is not the time to drool, Kuroka. What impressed the others was not Draco's musculature, but that his arm began to change color. The pale skin became as dark as coal, and strange white patterns crossed that black color. They visibly saw the skin harden and the arm grow larger and bigger. The strange pattern sank in. It was as if Draco's human skin split and became boulders, and those patterns were the cracks that separated these boulders that were once one and the same land. Scales. From the tips of his fingers, as far as Draco's clothing would let on, Draco's entire arm had been surrounded by scales. No, it was more accurate to say that his human skin had been transformed into dragon scales. Waver slumped back in his seat in shock. He had no words to express what he was feeling at the moment. The most important thing in his head was, were all the reverse side of the world theories that had evolved over the centuries wrong? Was all the Magus work for nothing? How is this possible? The young Waver forced himself to mutter. Draco shrugged his shoulders. I don't know. Maybe the laws of the world don't work on me. Maybe I am Gaia and Alea's favorite. It's also true that I haven't tried to take my true form yet. Maybe they interpret that I'm more human than dragon as long as I don't abuse my powers. A half-truth. It was true that Draco hadn't tried his dragon form, but most likely, using it wasn't going to give him any trouble. Besides, even if he was dragged to that place, he could always return using a fate point. After his explanation, he returned his arm back to his human form. It was strange to have a human body with a dragon arm. For some reason, Waver looked relieved. Just the opposite of Archer, he looked really furious as he looked at Ryder's master. Are you done interrupting this battle between kings, mongrels? Yes. Waver responded with a high-pitched squeak to Archer's question. It was funny to see the little master so frightened. With the matter of Waver settled, Gilgamesh turned his attention back to the competition. As you can see, be it wines or swords, only the best is reserved for my treasure. With this, it seems my grade as a king has already been decided. Pretty arrogant for a single wine, in Draco's opinion. Perhaps if he could actually enjoy it, he would have a more favorable opinion of Archer on this subject. Stop the banter, Archer, Saber bellowed. The silence was broken by a tense, intimidating atmosphere. I'm sick of hearing you bragging about your wine collection. You're not like a king, more like a clown. Archer grimaced a grin as he looked at Saber all elated. How ungracious. Someone who doesn't even know good wine is not at all fit to be a king. Draco had a big grin on his face, watching the amusing interaction between the two. This was something he had seen from behind a screen. It was totally different to feel it firsthand. Seeing Draco really enjoying himself also made Kuroka happy. It relieved her to see Draco taking his time to enjoy life, and not always be training, planning, or worrying about the future. After all, it's more important to enjoy the present than to worry about the future or regret the past. How did you meet Draco? Irisveal asked the clueless Kuroka. The place chosen for the banquet was the parterre in the central courtyard of the castle. Thanks to Draco's actions, there was no battle the night before in the castle. It was cold, but that didn't matter to anyone present. Ryder brought the chest to the central courtyard, and the three of them sat down in a sort of triangle. Kuroka sat next to Irisveal and Waver, while Mordred watched standing. It was funny how she looked like a bodyguard. Ryder shattered the chest's lid with his fist. The musky fragrance of rice wine filled the air of the courtyard. Although it was made in an odd shape, it is the unique cup in this country. Ryder happily poured some wine with a long bamboo ladle. Unfortunately, no one pointed out the error in his common sense. Ryder first drained the wine into the ladle in one gulp and said, I heard that only those who are worthy will get the Holy Grail. The solemn tone set the atmosphere in silence. Something must be going on if this man is speaking in this tone of voice. In the ceremony of choosing him worthy is this battle conducted in Fuyuki. However, if we are only spectators, there will be no need for bloodshed. As heroic spirits, if we can mutually recognize each other's strength. I don't have to say more after this, do I? Without hesitation, Saber took the long ladle that Ryder passed to her and took a full measure of wine. Saber's slender body made the others worry if she could truly drink alcohol. However, Saber's determination with the drink was not deficient in any way compared to that of the giant Ryder. Seeing this, Ryder happily praised her. So, first, you're going to compete with me to see who's the strongest, Ryder? Exactly. Going through a real competition in the name of majesty. But we can't call this the Holy Grail War. We'd better call it the Holy Grail Trial. In the end, between the King of Knights and the King of Conquerors, who will become the King of the Holy Grail? It is more appropriate to ask that question to the wine cup. Ryder made a complete turn from the previous solemn tone, laughing as if making a joke. Then he began to speak to himself. Speaking of which, there's another fellow here who calls himself King. The jokes end here half-breed, as if responding to Ryder's vague words. A dazzling golden light shone to arrive in front of those present. "Archer, why are you here?" Saber mentioned furiously, but the one responding was the impassive Ryder. When I saw him on the street, I invited him to drink together. But you're late anyway, Goldie. Anyway, it's different than my case. He walked here, so it's not all his fault. Archer, in full armor, looked arrogantly at Ryder with his fiery pair of ruby-like eyes. "I trust you picked this disgusting place to conduct the banquet. This is probably all the good taste you can get. How are you going to repay your sin of making me come all the way here?" "Don't say that. Go on, have a drink first." Laughing warmly, Ryder passed the ladle full of wine to Archer. People thought he would be infuriated with Ryder's attitude, but surprisingly, he straightforwardly took the ladle and swallowed all the wine in one gulp. Irisville remembered the challenge Saber mentioned earlier. "Archer, since this anonymous golden heroic spirit calls himself a king, he couldn't refuse the wine Ryder passed to him. What kind of cheap wine is this? How can you use this kind of wine to conduct a fight between heroes?" Archer said with revulsion written all over his face. "Really? I bought it here at the market. It's a pretty good wine. You only think that because you don't know anything about wine, beggar." From one side of Archer, who mockingly desiccated in wine, ripples appeared in the empty space. That was the herald of the strange event that could summon noble phantasms. Waver and Irisville felt a chill run down their spines. But what appeared at Archer's side tonight were not weapons. Instead, it was a set of wine bottles engraved with sparkling gems. A lucid, colorless liquid filled the bottles made of heavy gold. "Admire. This is what the king's wine should be." "Oh, thank you very much." Ryder paid no attention to Archer's tone and happily poured the new wine into 4 glasses. Saber was still on guard against Archer, whose identity she did not yet know. She hesitantly looked at the wine in the golden bottle, but still took the glass passed to her. "This is definitely excellent wine." Draco complimented the wine, and he wasn't lying at all. He probably hadn't tasted anything approaching the quality of this drink. As expected from Gilgamesh, the wine was fiery and clear, soft and invigorating. The pungent fragrance filled his nose, and his whole body felt like it was floating. Or that should be the feeling Draco would have to have if it weren't for the fact that he was immune to poisons. It was a shame, but he could no longer enjoy alcoholic beverages like a normal person could. This is the drink of the gods. It's normal for even a dragon known for his exquisite palate to think it's fabulous. Archer spared no expense when it came to being cocky. Getting a dragon's attention like this was something he had never managed to do in his life. This was already a victory for him. "Wait, did you say dragon?" The 4 kings turned to look at Waver, who had interrupted their meeting. He had a shocked look on his face, as if he couldn't believe what he had heard. "How did you meet Draco?" Irisville asked the clueless Kuroka. Irisville's question took Kuroka by surprise. She had come to observe how Draco worked. She had no intention of socializing. Hair of an artificial platinum color and red eyes that reminded her of the color of blood. She must be the homunculus Draco had spoken of earlier, a potential ally in the future. That being the case, it wouldn't be so bad to converse with her either. "Draco rescued us, my younger sister and me a few years back," Kuroka said without looking away from Draco. "I've been by his side ever since, and will continue to be. He has a very heavy burden on his shoulders. My job is to help him lighten that burden." "A very heavy burden?" Irisville looked at the young man who was smiling as the king of knights and archer. He was a famous hero at the par of Saber, even if Irisville didn't know who he was right now. Faced each other. He didn't seem to be too worried. While everyone was tense as they watched these 2 kings fight, he was simply smiling. It looked like he was watching some sort of spectacle. It was hard to think that he really had a burden that worried him. He doesn't seem to be worried, does he? Irisville nodded her head at Kuroka's question. Draco didn't seem worried about anything. But that wasn't the only time she had seen Draco so unconcerned. As the other time she had encountered him, he hadn't seemed worried at all. In fact, the only time Irisville had spoken to Draco, he always maintained that enigmatic smile that didn't let her see what he was really thinking. Wait, Irisville's eyes widened as she realized the detail. Could it be that Draco never let others see what his own thoughts were? She knew a person who also acted this way, albeit in a different way. When she first met Kiritsugu, he kept his face cold, and it was impossible to tell what he was thinking. This changed over the years, especially once they got married and Ilya was born. However, Kiritsugu had returned to displaying that facade since the Holy Grail War began. Have you noticed yet? Kuroka noticed the change in Irisville's expression. Even if she had barely changed her expression, Kuroka was able to notice such minute details. Not for nothing had he been together with Draco for so many years. In the beginning, Draco was not like that. In fact, at first he was like an open book, openly showing what he was thinking at every moment. Over time, however, he became more reserved. It's very difficult to know what Draco is really thinking. Or at least it's complicated for anyone but me. He can't hide anything from me. Kuroka smiled full of self-confidence. After all, the relationship she had with Draco was very special. That's why she could tell that he was really letting himself go right now without worrying about anything. It had been a long time since she had seen him like that. What exactly is your relationship with him? Irisville asked out of pure curiosity. This girl had to be a really close person to Draco, to the point that he trusted her to bring her to this place. I'm his wife. Enough. You both tire me out. Ryder smiled helplessly and pointed at Saber, who still wanted to say something, to keep quiet. Then he returned to the previous topic. Archer, the great wines you have certainly deserved to be contained in only the most pressed of cups. But unfortunately, the Holy Grail is not meant to contain wine. Now we're going to have a Holy Grail test to determine if one among us is truly worthy of obtaining the Holy Grail. First, you must tell us why you want the Grail. Archer, like a king, try to convince us that you and no one else is the worthy person to win the Holy Grail. Draco was a little surprised by Ryder's attitude about the Holy Grail. Maybe he didn't believe what Draco had told him the other day? No, that probably wasn't it. Maybe he simply thought it was the interesting competition between kings, without attaching any importance to the Holy Grail. That would make sense in someone as simple as Iskandar is. You are very irritating. First, we are going to compete for the Holy Grail. I'm afraid your question is too far removed from that premise. Huh. Seeing Ryder raise his eyebrows in confusion and surprise, Archer sighed resignedly. For starters, the Holy Grail is something that should be in my possession. All the treasures in the world originate from my collection. Anyway, as much time has passed, it has disappeared from my treasury. But I still own it. So you say you once owned the Holy Grail. Do you know what it is? No. Archer denied Ryder's question in one breath. It is not something you can understand. The total amount of my wealth exceeds even my knowledge. Still, as long as it is a treasure, it obviously belongs to me. You should be more tactful in trying to steal my treasure. Now it was Saber who was speechless. Your way of speaking isn't much different from Castor's. It seems he's not the only demented servant here. Don't compare me to a dead man. Archer returned the reproach. Hey, Ryder, fill me up another glass. Sure. While Archer and Saber argued, Draco and Ryder continued at their own pace. Speaking of whom, I think I know your name now. There should only be one person more arrogant than Iskandar, Ryder muttered as he refilled Draco's glass. It took you that long to figure it out? Well, at least you're less of an idiot than others who can't recognize it at a glance. Draco received a piercing glare from Saber, who took notice. On the other hand, Irisville and Waver focused on Draco and Ryder's words. Even Kiritsugu, who was listening to the conversation through an eavesdropping device, became more focused than he already was. That means dash. Ryder drained the wine into his glass. What does that mean? Could there be any cause and reason? It's the law. Archer immediately replied. The law I declared as the king. Ryder seemed to have understood his words, and gave a deep sigh. Such a perfect king capable of sticking to the laws he instituted himself. Anyway, I still desire the Holy Grail very much. My way is that if I desire something, I will obtain it by force. That is why I, Iskandar, am the king of conquerors. Not necessarily. If you invade, I will punish. There is no room for negotiation. Then we can only meet on the battlefield. With a solemn face, Archer nodded at the same time as Ryder. But Archer, let's drink first and leave the business of battle for later. Sure, unless you don't see the wine I brought very well. Absurd. How could I go without drinking such delicious liquors? Kuroka, who had been watching Draco with a smile so far, frowned. What Ryder was saying was not amusing Draco. Irisveal also noticed the change in Kuroka's gesture, which made her think that something wasn't right. So you still haven't changed your mind, Ryder? Iskandar remained silent and looked down at the ground after hearing Draco. It didn't take him long to raise his head to look Draco in the eyes. The flame of determination in them said it all. That's right. Even if it's true, I'm not willing to take a step back. Now Saber could no longer tell whether Archer and Ryder were friends or foes. Nor did she understand what Draco and Ryder were talking about. She merely sat to the side, looking at the three of them. After a short while, she finally opened her mouth to Ryder. Conqueror King, since you've already admitted that the Holy Grail belongs to someone else, are you still going to take it by force? Huh? Obviously. My creed is conquer, which is take and invade. Suppressing the anger in her heart, Saber continued to ask, then why do you want the Holy Grail? Unexpectedly, Ryder smiled, somewhat sheepishly. He answered after a sip of wine. I want to be a human. It was such an unexpected answer. Even Waver stood out and shouted almost hysterically. Ow, wow, you. It could be that you still want to conquer this world. Wah! After forcing his master to stand still with a one-finger gesture, Ryder shrugged his shoulders. Idiot. How would I conquer the world with one life? Conquest is my dream, and I can only amend this first step to the Holy Grail. Half-breed, you challenge me with such a silly dream? Even Archer was helpless at this, but Ryder grew more serious and continued. Look, even if we appear in the current era thanks to Prana, in the end we are still servants. We originally didn't exist in this world, although it feels a bit ridiculous. But are you really satisfied with just that? I am not satisfied. I want to reincarnate in this world and continue living as a human. Thinking back, Waver originally thought that Ryder's stubbornness of refusing to go out in spiritual form and insisting on his physical form was just a habit of his. Certainly, although servants can speak, dress, and eat like humans, their true essence is not far removed from ghosts. Why? Do you want a body so badly? Because that's the cornerstone of conquest. Alexander mumbled as he looked down at his tightly clenched fist. To possess a body, to march to the end of the earth, to bring my own conquest, that is truly my way of kingship. But now I do not have a body. That will not do. Without a body, nothing can begin again. I am not afraid of anything in particular. I only feel that I must have a body of flesh and blood. As if diligently listening to Ryder's words, Archer only sipped his wine throughout this. Under closer inspection, one could notice that he had a strange expression on his face at this moment, an expression different from his usual ones. It might be implausible to describe it as a smile, but compared to his usual grimace, this smile now encompassed a particularly sinister glow. I have decided, Ryder, I will kill you with my own hands. Ha! Even now saying such things. You'd better get ready soon, too. And from setting aside the Grail, I also plan to plunder your treasure. Letting the King of Conquerors taste that delicious wine was very careless of you. You're both idiots. It's obvious that I'm going to be the one to kill you. Ryder burst into brutal laughter after hearing Draco. You're right. We'll most likely end up as Lancer, Caster, or Assassin. I guess we're just unlucky to be involved in this particular war. Still, I'm not going to make it easy for you. I hope so. Easy fights are very boring. Lancer at least gave me some fight. I can't say the same for Caster and Assassin, Draco said with a smile. But there was still one person here attending the banquet who had yet to show even a trace of a smile. Saber, attending this banquet, could find no place to join Archer, Ryder, and Draco's conversation throughout this one. The manner of kingship the two kings spoke of was too far removed from what she believed in, and she understood little of what Draco meant between the lines, so she had no common theme at all. Only according to your own will. This is not a thought a king should have. To Saber, who believed in incorruptibility, Archer and Ryder were just tyrants. Draco was not a human king, but it seemed that he partly coincided with the thoughts of these two kings. He had come to a battlefield where he did not belong and was getting involved of his own free will, and ruining the war for his own selfishness. No matter how imposing an opponent is, the unwavering vigor of battle still burned within Saber's heart. Only these three were the enemies she could not lose to. She should never let the Grail fall into their hands. Archer's words were meaningless. Draco sought only destruction, and Ryder's wish could only be considered the wish of a fighter. Moreover, it was only the first of all men's desires. Compared to his desires, the desire Saber harbors must be nobler. Hey, tell me, Saber, talk about your wish too. Ryder finally turned to Saber. No matter when it was, the desire in his heart never wavered. My way of kingship is my pride. With her head held high, the King of Knights said, looking straight at the other two heroic spirits. I want to save my motherland. I will change England's path of destruction.